So this one was day one. There's also a sequence to these. I mean, this is kind of the order in which we went on them in class, right? One of them is we're always learning more than one thing at a time. Our short version of this is learning is wild. But really, it's these two together that constitute learning is wild, right? We're always learning more than one thing at a time, right? Head, heart, mind, body, spirit, eyes, brain, hands, feet, I don't know, like body part, soul, values, attitudes, knowledge, skills, sensibilities, right? We're always learning more than one thing at a time. If I could add to this, it would just be a light switch with a big, like we can't just turn it on and off. That's not how we're programmed. We may not have a specific software program in place, but we do seem to come out into the world doing this, okay? Questions? And then we went to this, right? Which is all about ladders versus leaves. I know there's no leaf on here, but ladders versus leaves seems like an easier thing to say. Maybe it's because it's alliterative. It seems easier to say than ladders versus trees, right? I had to keep coming back to this one because I wasn't confident that I had said what I meant to say, which is not that you either have a ladder or a leaf, or a ladder or a tree. It's really these two things, right? The top one says learning in the wild, right? Learning in its quote-unquote natural state. What learning will do anyway, if we were to map it, would be mapped something like a tree. It's not just a metaphor, although it is metaphorical. It's to say that if we could translate learning into movement and we were to track it, it would look like a tree. That's David Hawkins' claim, right? So where does the leaf come from? That if I were to take everybody's learning trajectories and lay them on top of one another, they'd all be crisscrossed, right? Another way to say that is nobody has the same tree. But the tree-like structure of our learning over time is the first part of this. And the second part is we can make it a ladder. But in order to make it a ladder, we have to cut off some branches, right? Now, some of you have taken this up and said, okay, but the first part of a tree is pretty straight up and down, so the first early learning should be ladder-like. Let's have that conversation. I think it's a real important conversation to have. Are there times when ladder, right? Okay, yeah. Can we zoom in on any one particular thing and it looks pretty straight? Absolutely. If you want to contend with a claim that, for example, early learning should be more structured and linear, fine, right? But that's not really what the metaphor is getting at. I think you can pull it into that direction, but that's not what I mean to communicate by this. It's just to say, look, it's all branchy, unless we cut the branches off, right? And there is a subtext, not very sub, it's been pretty explicit, right? I'll see if I can do this backwards, right? Which is that school learning, it's called curriculum, right? The way it's planned out in school looks would be more like a ladder than a leaf or a tree. This is a claim about how things work, how things are, not how things should be, even if you hear me saying, I wish there were more branches in school, right? The basic claim is you have to have this first. Any questions? No, forget any questions. It's a terrible thing because then you're on the spot for asking questions. What are your questions here? I need to know. Okay, if you're not ready to share them and if you don't have them, cool. If you do have them, write them down, get them out there in the world if you're not going to get them out here in this space, okay? The next one is just a definition of opportunity as circumstance, right? That is, opportunity is not about, it's a claim that rather than thinking about opportunity as upward movement, just think about opportunity as whatever the circumstances provide. And circumstances, I mean very practical. Place you're in, the thing you're being asked to do, who else is around, who's asking questions, who's watching, all that stuff, right? What tools you have. Circumstances. Opportunity is a matter of circumstance, right? Now, this came after this. Why? Because most of the time we think about opportunity as moving up the ladder, but you could also think about an opportunity to go out and do some crazy stuff, right? Go out and try ideas, go out and try stuff out, go out and make mistakes, right? That's why this came first. Okay, opportunity is a matter of circumstance. There's a lecture that I kind of wish I hadn't done the way I did it, which was like all the wrong ways to think about opportunity. I believe those things. I worry that they were a little bit of a distraction from the main point, which is that the way to think about opportunity is a matter of circumstances, right? And so when we think about opportunity, let's think about what's actually happening at a given place and a given time, not some idea about achievement gaps or what job you're going to have in 40 years. Maybe you'll be retired in 40 years. Yes. What's that? I'm saying that when I see, so they're not synonyms. They're definitely not synonyms, which is what this my attempt to be cute kind of did, right? Right? It makes them look the same. My point is for me, the right way to think about circumstance, what I'm asking you to try out is the right way to think about, opportunity, is to look at what any given set of circumstances affords or offers and constrains or limits, right? What's possible for your child in a given set of circumstances? What's possible? Maybe the better version is opportunity. I'll change it if it works better. We'll try it out. Opportunity is another word for what any given set of circumstances offers. That's what I mean. It's like, it's a way to think about circumstances. Yeah, I don't mean for them to be synonyms, although that sure is what it looks like. Yeah, that's the one I've had the least amount of practice trying to get right. Right? This one isn't, that one in the end isn't permanent marker. Right? This one I just did this morning because I'm trying to figure out the right way to say it. Okay. Next. Democracy. Now this is in brackets on purpose. I say democracy is good for people because it's good for learning. Now, holy cow, if you weren't here for that lecture or you haven't engaged with the readings by Dewey and Woodruff and others, this is going to seem like, what are you talking about, right? I just, very quick by means of review. I don't care if we use the word, I'm not arguing for democracy. I'm arguing for whatever Dewey and others describe and name democracy, which is the give and take of ideas and experiences, right? Against special privileges being given by birth or by test, right? A sense of equal chance to have your needs expressed, not only expressed, but met. So how does that work? It means that if I'm sitting down with you and you have different needs and experiences than I do, and I need to take them seriously in measuring my own course of action, that's going to demand something of me that I wouldn't demand for myself. One version of this is democracy. That's how bad it is. Democracy, right? Democracy is a word for a set of relationships that demand more from you than you would demand of yourself. Right? So it's the demand that democracy is. That's what I'm trying to capture here. And the reason it's in brackets is if the word is dialectic, who is it that came up with dialectic? If it's dialectics and that works for you, great. If it's dialogue, that's great. Right? Democracy works for me because I think it has more power. In 2015 in the United States. Okay? In other places, it might be other terms. Okay? That's those. You can see this is like my cheap way of doing it. That's why they're going to fall down. Questions? Yeah.
So you said democracy is a way of enhancing the imagination, and by that
Yeah.
I mean because everyone is saying things we can all think about things in different ways.
I think that's it. Yeah. So that was in that lecture, right? Democracy is a way to enhance or exercise the imagination, right? And I don't mean that doesn't I'm not meaning imagination in terms of creativity, but you nailed it, right? Which is that it's a way you can think of things that I can't think of. You watch a movie and you like it or don't like it for reasons that it's not just that we saw the same movie and disagree. It's that we might have seen a different movie because you saw some things that I didn't see, right? It's not just opinion, it's actually perception and experience is different. Okay? Yeah.
And it kind of goes back to circumstances as well. Your circumstances, your opportunity, dictates how you think, and therefore.
So this would be tying these together. If I were to put these in a sentence, it would be that the thing I'm calling democracy provides a good opportunity for learning that looks more like a tree. If right now you went, what? That's okay. It's not because I just said something super advanced. It's just because I tied a bunch of things that might be so far separate together. But give it some thought. All right, so then we go to this. Now, there is a kind of break right here, right? Like, it's harder to make a sentence with those plus these. But here's the thing. This one's easy, and I'll say it quickly because I just have a hard time imagining we're going to disagree about this. But these two right here are going to be, believe it or not, as impactful as the rest of them put together in our own thinking. So if you're on Facebook or Etsy or Tinder, for God's sake, just get off for a second because we gotta get this. Some people are smarter than others. Sometimes with some tasks, with some tools, right? So depending on what it is, where you are, and what you have in your hands or head, you might be smarter, right? And then I just wanted to add the more motivated is not a separate claim. It's like I could also do the same sentence with some people are more motivated, sometimes with some tasks, with some tools, right? Now, this is the one that people go, I'm not sure how this connects, right? And I think maybe the important thing is that this is about its implications, right? This has a different set of implications than this does. This says, I could say something like, man, you know what school ought to do? You know what the problem is, god dang it? The problem is that school only really values verbal, linguistic, and logical kinds of thinking. And there are lots of different intelligences. So the easy way to take this up is everybody's different, right? And we got to make sure we have a school that accommodates everybody's differences. The problem with school is that it doesn't recognize or value or celebrate all the great diversity in the world. And I want to say that's great. Let's light candles and hold hands and look at each other deeply in the eyes and say, I see how different you are and I love that about you. And you can make, carnitas tacos and I'll make, Penang curry and somebody else will make a good old-fashioned American hamburger and we're going to be good because we're diverse and we can do things different. And if you don't know how to cook, you'll be a good eater. Right? And I want to say, yeah, right on, right? But the danger is that this feels so obviously true, and we can see it just by looking around at each other and at our family members and at our friends, right? That it obscures an underlying factor. And so I'll talk about this for about 10 minutes, and then we'll be done with this stuff, okay? Well, I'll start with 10 minutes, and then you'll tell me what's still not totally unclear. Okay? All right. When I say ability, I mean smart, more motivated. It's a catch-all term. I look around the room, and look, some people are tall and short. Some people are fast and slow. Some people have an accent and some don't. This is just a fancy extension of what we already know is true, which is that people are different. This is harder because it indicts us. This is a statement about the culture that we build for each other in and out of classrooms. So you guys remember this story? If you don't nod your head. Do you remember this, the hurry up story? Angelina sticking the note under the door, right? Now, and that story is really a way into the punchline of the story, right? Which is that her grandmother says, what am I going to do, right? A version of what am I going to do? I'm so worried about Angelina. She can only do this. That story is really a way to build this case, right? Her grandmother is right. If you can't, I see some people leaning in. Her grandmother is right to worry. Why? Because she knows that when Angelina walks into a classroom, this question is going to get asked. Whether or not somebody says, who's smart in here, or it's a feature of the scene that she's in, this question is out there. It doesn't mean that the teacher stands up and asks it. It doesn't even mean that students look at each other and ask it, although they do. It's far more common than the teacher saying, who's smart? You do find that, by the way, in classrooms. Let me say this. You don't find the question as much as you find the statement that implies the question. What do I mean by that? You finish your drawing first. And so often the adult who's around says some version of, you are so smart, right? You're such a good blank. You're such a good artist. You're so good at math. You're so good at detail. The minute that an authority figure in a classroom says that, it suggests the question in the room is, who's good? The teacher provides the answer, and it implies the question. That's what this is getting at. So if you walk into a classroom, right, where the teacher, for good reason, the teacher, for lots of defensible reasons, has divided the class up into reading groups, red-winged blackbirds. That was me. Why would the teacher do that? Not to say to a kid, you're kind of dumb, you're kind of slow. And not to say, you're fast, I like you better, but because the teacher's trying to do something strategic, which is, I got to get the kids who are basically the same level if I want to get them to read the same book. Why are we getting them to read the same book? We got to get them to read the same book So I got to put kids of the same level together. I don't want to slow down the fast ones. I don't want to intimidate the slow ones. You've heard that before, right? I don't want to slow down the fast ones. I don't want to make that it turns into sympathy, right? I don't want the slow kids to feel bad about themselves. So I'll put them into groups. The minute that we put people into groups inside of a school, this question sneaks its way into the room. I've seen it again and again. It doesn't mean every time, but it's like it opens the door for the question of who's smarter. If I divided this class, right? If I said, I've actually done it before and it caused such distress that I decided not to do it again. A couple years ago, I divided the class into groups. And I gave them neutral names. And I said, you guys will be the red group, you guys will be the yellow group, and you guys will be the green group. Red group, and I gave them different assignments. Within minutes, people were asking each other what the other group was, and then asking like, "Why am I in the fast group? Am I in the slow group? Is this the honors group? Is that like?" I could just give you more to do. Like I could just randomly take a third of you and say, "Okay, you guys are going to be. I've got a lot to ask of you. Think about it. I'll say it like this. This is how teachers do it. I'm going to ask a lot of you, red group. You guys green group, right? You guys are the green group. Green group. Got a lot to ask of you. It's going to be really demanding. You guys up for it? I said, are you guys up for it? And you guys won't do it. But I mean, are you guys up for it? And I could ask it a few different ways. And by the end, even if begrudgingly, even if it was begrudging, people would go, yeah, I'm up for it. Even if you turn to your neighbor, man, this is stupid. Yeah, I'm up for it. Stupid guy. Some of you, though, would be like, man, hell yes, I'm up for it. I knock this paper out of the park. And I could say, if you finish this paper well, you won't have to take the final. It substitutes for the final. And I could just say it. And I could take the middle group. And I could say, okay, you guys are going to have a challenging piece of work, right? And I'd give you some task that was a shorter paper, but you had to look at a YouTube video or something. And I say, you guys, right? The paper is kind of long, so I want to give you guys a different opportunity. I don't even have to say better, right? And before too long, people over there are like, I think there's this is the dumb group that, even if I don't have an answer, the minute that I divide you up, the question gets in the room. Is there a fast group? Am I in it? And if I'm not in it, now some of you are much more strategic thinkers than that. And you go, I know, I'm not going to buy this teacher's nonsense about who's smart. I'm going to go in the group that looks like the least amount of work. Right? But even if that's what you decide strategically, what you're doing is rejecting the metric that's in the room, the measurement in the room about smart. You're saying that's not important to me. But it's there for you to reject or accept. This is about some people will be smarter than others when the question in the room is who's smarter than others. The answer, right? If I can imply the question, then I get the answer, somebody's smarter, and then I can figure out ways of determining it. That's what this is about, right? I know it seems metaphorical. It is metaphor. It's a metaphor. It's Apollo 11. You know, Neil Armstrong, all that jazz. One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. I could try to tell the little joke again that I tell if you think it's a hoax, just roll with it. But, all right, so this is an actual map. And I got to be honest, this looks dense, and then I put it on this and I go, wow, that seems a lot smaller than I imagined it to be because I know what a baseball diamond looks like. And the moon is big. And when I hear we landed people on the moon and they were exploring, I think of this. I don't think of this. This seems very small. The distance from the pitcher's mound, right, to the farthest Neil Armstrong got, all of a sudden looks short. But it's only short because of what I superimpose it on. Short or long, far or close, far or near. I feel like Grover. You guys have seen that Grover one? Sorry. You guys seen Sesame Street, right? Yeah, near, far. Anyway. The near, far, fast, slow is not a matter of what Neil Armstrong did. It's a matter of the ground on which we put him. In an unexplored moon, this looks amazing. If I put it on a baseball diamond, it looks short, right? So where does the question come from? The question, how far is it, doesn't come from us. It comes, at some level, the question comes from the ground on which we put it. And if I put it, this next one, right, now it's like, well, that's a different, the ground implies different questions. So a way to think about this is that somebody will be smarter than others inside of a culture which asks the question, who's smarter than others? And I don't mean culture like American culture, although I could do that too, but like a classroom culture. Now, sometimes this is super important, like on a basketball court or a soccer pitch, or, I don't know, going to brush our teeth at our house at night. Yes, sometimes who's faster is the fun, right question to ask. And when I'm sitting in my kitchen, we have a super long hallway. I cannot stand helping my kids with brushing their teeth unless I say, all right, first person to the toothbrush. All right, boom, we're off. The question of who's faster was not in anybody's heads until I said on your mark, say go. The question of how far did Neil Armstrong walk is not there until we go, wait, I put the ground up. So that's what this gets at. This statement is about. It's not just that some people are smarter than others because they're all different. It's that some people are smarter than others when we're asking who's smarter than others. When I set up tasks where who's smarter or faster or slower or more motivated than another person is what's relevant. The minute that I say I'm a good teacher, the minute that I try to motivate people to finish by saying, all right, the first group done gets to go to recess early. Raise your hand if you've heard anything similar to that in your lifetime in schools. The first group done gets to leave recess or gets to recess early. Yeah? Yeah? The first person to, if you're not done by, I do it to motivate you, right? But I'm also now bringing into the room the question of who's faster. So of course it would make sense for the person who finishes first to be like this when he walks up to the inbox. Put it in. To gloat. Of course. And then we say, why is that person so boastful? The person's so boastful because the teacher just said whoever finishes first gets to go to recess early. So the kid is walking around going, man, hey, yeah, I finished first. I'm going to recess early, suckers. My daughter, by the way, she's in her school. This is totally an aside. It has nothing to do with the course. Sucker has wound up in my daughter's vocabulary, which is cool on the one hand. But this morning she walked up, she goes, what's for breakfast, sucker? And I was like, what? And I said, you get your own breakfast, sucker. And she was like, man, I want some milk, sucker. And I was like, what are we doing? And she said, we're just using that all the time in school, Dad. All right. Last thing I said to her is, I'm going to work, sucker, and I ran out. Yeah. I didn't hear the first part of your question.
Is there any way to avoid, the question of who's smarter?
Is there any way to avoid it? I'm going to answer the question but with another question, but I think is that can we find places just where it's not? And I think there are lots of places where it's not. There's conversations we have with people, loving relationships we have with people. There's lots of moments and circumstances where the question on the table is not who's faster, right? There's a video. I feel like I should show the video. There's lots of circumstances where the question on the table is, who can do this in a way that's never been done before? Or we don't have a solution, right? So we need people to work together to come up with a solution. Where it's not about who's faster, but how do you work with other people? I had brunch. I don't go out. It sounds like I go to brunches all the time. I got the story of the Easter brunch with Angelina, and I was out to brunch. I've probably been to about 8 in my whole lifetime. I don't like brunches. I'm at a brunch with a vice president of Sony who was not super friendly. I'm hoping he never sees this video if it goes up. I didn't like him very much. He was kind of a know-it-all guy, not a real, but he was like, what do you do? First question, that's trouble when they say, what do you do? And I say, I teach. Really, where do you teach? Oh, I teach at UCSB. Anyway, I tell him I'm in education, and he goes, you know what's wrong with schools? No, but I bet you'll tell me. You know what's wrong with schools is I got to hire a bunch of people. You know what the problem is? The problem is when I hire a bunch of people, first, the problem with schools is they don't have high enough expectations. And I was like, yes, I've heard that a lot. Do you have high expectations for your students? And I'm like, oh boy, this is trouble. Yes, of course I have expectations. What kind of grades do they get? Oh, geez. Show my grading policy, and I can imagine him going, well, that's soft. Not hard enough. Too many people succeed. Then I said, well, he eventually got around. He says, the problem with schools is that I can't find anybody who, when I hire them into Sony, don't need to be held by the hand. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, everybody I hire can solve this. They're super high achieving. They can solve any problem I give them. But if I don't give them the problem, they just wait. They can't find any problems to solve. I need to find people who can, working with other people, think of and find problems that I can't think of. And I'm like, yeah. So even though his language was about high expectations, that's a circumstance, right? He's trying to hire people. It's not that speed doesn't matter. It's the question of who's smarter. It's more like, who can I find that's creative, that can think outside the box, so to speak, that can work with other people. He's not looking for people who are like racing to the front or like suckers, right? He's looking for people who can look at whatever the market is and whatever people and go and sit down and maybe with other people and argue with other people and say, I think this, what do you think? Even though his language is at the start is people aren't smart enough. The way he described his problem. So does that answer, right? So can we do anything to change it? I think before we do anything to change it, let's just say, can we find places where it's not true? And, fertilize those places, or at least have those more to the front of our minds. We'll get to more later. Yes?
To me, though, that question of who's more creative is just another version of who's smarter. Like, who's more creative, who's going to get hired for this job first?
Yeah.
And you could ask any version of that question, it would kind of be, or it would result in the same thing, who's smarter.
The difference is, and I didn't emphasize it enough, it's a great point. The difference is that when he's saying more creative, he's looking for a certain kind of smart, which I get, right? But he's also saying people who can innovate in the organization in which I'm in. He doesn't want people who will lock themselves in an office and go as fast as they can. He wants people who can work in a team, right? And that's different. And I think that's at odds.
Defining those as different.
Yeah.
Okay. So you see like smart and fast as
Yeah, let me do that.
people, and then
Yeah, that's a great way to clarify this. When I say smarter, I don't just mean better, right? I mean smarter where smarter is faster, and where motivated is something like more desire or more hard work.
so we're trying to get smarter in different ways.
Yeah,
If
we're.
we want to change that question, we need to look at smarter.
Well, look at the picture of Apollo 11, right? I mean, certainly we ask different questions depending on what ground they're on, right? If I'm doing this, I might say, right, not how far did you go. There's still a way of evaluating. That's a super great point. You're helping me. I know I'm thinking out loud, but you're pushing my thinking in a way that I really value, so thank you. It's not that we shouldn't evaluate at all, right? I'm not saying we should never evaluate, but the things we evaluate are much less one-dimensional, right? So I would ask all kinds of questions here, like, what happened over here? Right? What happened over here? Were there any pictures taken right here? Which is more about how detailed a view did you get than this, which is how far did you get. This is so one-dimensional, right? So for example, if I could ask questions about reading, right, that aren't about speed. My daughter has to practice the same passage every day for an entire week so that she can improve her time. What do you think the question is in the room when she walks into her classroom? Who's the fastest? I was the fastest reader for many years running at Cabrillo Middle School. Who cares? All I did was keep my eyes open when they did the like lines, and I'm going, yes. And then I answered 5 questions. It was like, I got it. I'm the fastest. So uninteresting. I could ask so many other questions about reading. Like, what did you think of? What do you want to make with that idea? I could ask so many other questions, right? So, right, it's not no evaluation. It's that the metric is so narrow. Thank you for the question. I'll get better at describing this one. Yes.
Well, we could even go back to the leap or branch-like learning. So if you're faster, you're on a ladder and you're analyzing where you went. But then for the first picture, it's the actual moon. That's
Oh, yeah.
more of like a
Yeah.
tree. And
Oh, nice.
you're looking over here, you're looking over here. Which part are you in?
Another, yeah. So can I take that? Yeah. So I'm gonna take it. So if I am standing on a ladder, the question of who's higher or lower is the question. I don't have to ask it. It's implied by the ladder. If I'm way out on a branch of a tree, the question might be who's higher or lower, but it might be how far out are you? Or is there a bird nest over there? Or can you reach the piece of fruit? Because I'm hungry. Okay. Yep. I'm exhausted but excited. Thank you. Yes.
Is it possible to, like, as an individual, like, let's say, like, you're teaching a classroom, and you use all those ideas instead of, like, are you faster? Doesn't that eventually catch up with the student when it comes down to, like, testing, like, the time testing and stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yes. You want more for me to say? You're like, he always says more. Yes, it catches up with you.
So is it worth it to do those things? If you
I feel delighted by the question. I refuse to answer. Because that is a question that you should talk about. Is it worth it? But God damn it, when you ask that question, put your own child in front of you. And I'm okay if you say, you know what? It's ladders all the way through, because that's what my child is going to get measured on. But don't answer that question unless you have your own gingerbread kid in front of you. And by the way, the reason I told the story about my hallway is racing to go brush our teeth, right? And I also want to say I'm sorry if I offended you with taking the Lord's name in vain. Some people are offended by that. It's not my intention. It's the way it comes out. It's lazy. When I think of a better way of doing it besides curse words, when I can come up with them, I will. So accept my apologies. Forgive me. There will be more. So maybe forgive me in advance. The reason I mentioned the thing in the hallway is because I don't want you to imagine that what I'm saying is competition or races or who's faster is a question we should never ask. It's awesome to ask that question. It's so fun to be in a pool trying to race a person to the wall or trying to make a shot past the person or like throwing a noodle out and racing, right? That's fun. It's also fun to surf, which doesn't involve all the time racing. There's different things you can do, right? So I want to be clear. Don't think that I'm saying ladders are bad. They just ought to have their place for my own child. You decide what you want for your own child. All right. So that's that. School. I want you to spend, I want you to do the following things in the following order. First, I'm going to ask you to just stand up and stretch your body and talk to somebody. If you're Catholic, it's like offering each other the sign of God's peace. And I don't know what it is in any other religion. And then after that, I want you to sit down, and I want you to spend 2 minutes only writing your answer to this question. Okay, go now. I'll put on some background music. All right. Finish whatever thing you have on your list. Ooh, I better quiet this down. And you can keep your pencils in your hand and do whatever you like with your pencil, but you can stop doing the list. Let's hear 11 of them. Yep. Desks.
Teacher at the front of the room.
The teacher at the front of the room. Some kind of board. Yeah. Like boredom. Go ahead.
There's like a bell.
A bell.
It starts
Ring. Yes.
Note-taking thing.
Note-taking things. Yes.
You're surrounded by people your age.
Surrounded by people your age. In the back. Everybody does what the teacher says, or tries to look like they're doing what the teacher says. I'll accept it if you add that. Yes. Separate subjects. Yep. Classroom rules. Posted, probably. Right? Yes.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of Allegiance to start. Nice. Yeah, I don't have. Are we at 11? Yes.
An expectation that the information is going to be retained.
An expectation that you got to remember, right? And so that's why when I say things like this is going to be on the quiz, people go, snap, school time. Yes.
Timed activities.
What's that?
Timed activities.
It sounded like a foreign language when you just said that. Can you say it again?
Timed activities.
Timed activities. Thanks. I thought. Never mind. I thought you said something else altogether. Yes.
Dress code.
Dress code.
Wouldn't show up to class in trunks.
In what?
Like in trunks and shirts.
Actually, I've had people show up in trunks, but certainly not at. You're absolutely right. Right? If somebody shows up in trunks, people are like, "Man, look at that guy in trunks." Beautiful. Yeah, sure. Some schools actually have dress codes where you have to have a certain thing, right? Plaid, skirt, khaki, whatever it is. All right, great. Yeah, I'm going to go through some more. Most of you are pretty good at identifying. Oh, wait. So what I just did, sorry, I forgot I had this slide. What I just did is try to get at what our common sense is, right? And there's a reason for this for the whole rest of the course. It says common sense is what we call, right? These are the stories we tell ourselves about the way things are and the way things should be that explain why we do what we do. Don't write this down. You're not going to be quizzed on it. It's just, you'll see the slide a bunch. This is common sense. Common sense is the stories we tell ourselves, right? Given the information we have, how do we assemble it into a story, right? So the story here is, oh, I'm in school now, right? And we're assembling a bunch of facts. That common sense is sense-making, given a bunch of facts. That's what we mean. So this is really about common sense accounts of school. Don't worry about what the definition of common sense is. I made that up, okay? It took me some time to get it right, but that's an invention. School. So we're going to talk about big practices, and small practices. Big practices, well, you'll get it in a second. Big practices. Often just a whole bunch of people of the same age together, roughly the same age together in a single place, right? There aren't a lot of other places where that happens. That already cuts it off from a lot of the world, right? A lot of people often in a confined place. Note takers, you can write this down. The rest of you, just let it. You can, but I'm not worried about you remembering each of these. Okay, the note takers will do that for you. So, a bunch of people, roughly the same age, in a confined place, and often divided up into smaller groups. Right, so it's not just a giant hall. This is about as big as it gets. Campbell has room for 800. Right, but mostly you have smaller classrooms. Now I want you just to test this out. If you have a bunch of kids about the same age, not in a building, but running around, what would you, I know some of you are like, well, that must be recess. But let's say it was like, I don't know, out by a lake. What would you think that might be? Yes? Summer camp, right? Same fact, but not in, so this is one. There's more. Teacher in front, somebody said, right? The teacher up in front, but also just that there's one teacher and a lot of students, right? So if there's one teacher and one student, we call that tutoring, right? When there's one teacher with many students, that just tells us school, right? Typically, I want to say a little bit more about this. So one teacher, many students, often one teacher at the front, but when not at the front, usually the teacher is higher, not just by virtue of height. So there's nothing, for most of you, there's nothing unusual that because I'm the person who's listed as the teacher, am up here on the stage, right? But when people jump up on stage, as happened early on, right? People are like, what? One teacher, usually higher. When you get kids, here's a test. When you get kids, if you follow kids around long enough, you'll see when they play school, right? First of all, this is super interesting. The person who wants to play school always wants to be the teacher, right? So it's like, let's play school. I'll be the student. That doesn't usually happen. Most of the time it's, I'll play school, you be the student, right? In my house, That got tried a couple of times, and the other kids were like, man, forget that. Can I be the teacher? No, well, forget it. But usually what will happen is the person who decides they want to be teacher will grab a book and will sit on a chair and make everybody sit down. Right? And if it's high school, you're standing and they're sitting in chairs, but you get the same like higher, right? So one person, one teacher, many students. Those roles are formalized and they're often enacted by height, right? And location. Tells you it's school. I was going to start today's, I'll just run the experiment. I'll just tell you what I was going to do and you can imagine what would have happened. I was going to start class sitting down right in the middle. I've done it before. It makes people very uncomfortable. Because I can do the whole lecture sitting down with, I've got the remote. I can point at stuff, right? It's like it doesn't feel like, it's just like something's not right about that. Okay. Lots of books, right? And an idea that knowledge is contained in books, right? Which is partly the teacher also often has a book. There's also a kind of economy in schools around books, right? As the books belong to the school, you have to check them out. You have to sign your name. You have to pay for them if you lose them. Prices are always totally way out of line with what they actually cost. We lost a bunch of books at school, and I just went on Amazon and found them. Guess what? My daughter says, you're still going to have to pay for them. And I'm like, that is crazy. That's how it works in school. School owns the books, right? It's part of the economy of a school. But you'll see often books, right? Books actually now may be being replaced. This may be a little obsolete. Maybe being replaced by laptops in a lot of places, right? Okay, a curriculum that goes something like this, right? If I go back to that slide, every time you're going to see that animation. So I'm not going to go backwards. But a curriculum, and we did that on like early on, right? Where I said counting, addition. We'll just do it real quick. It only takes like 5 seconds. Addition. Oh, come on. Now it's going to take more than 5 seconds. Counting, addition. Of course. And it goes on, right? Okay. So, but lots of subjects are like that. It is nuts that I can say to a kid who's 9 or 10 years old, try it. Do this. Blow their minds. Find a kid who's 9 or 10 years old. Find a kid who's in 4th grade. Say, what grade are you in? In 4th grade. And say, have you done your mission project yet? Kids go, how did you know I was going to do the mission project? Well, because 4th grade is California history. And they're like, I still don't get it. Right? Because that's what you do in 4th grade. It's changing a little bit now with Common Core, but try it, see what you get. Tests, somebody said tests, lots and lots of tests. Tests that don't get you, and tests often that are pen to paper. In their most narrow constrained form, it's filling in bubbles. Sometimes it's, right? But most of you have not been in school, right? It wouldn't feel like school if we said, okay, now you're going to dance your understanding of physics. Sounds funny, right? Go on YouTube. Look up dissertations, physics, dance. That's pretty awesome. It can be done, right? But if I were to do that, people would be like, that doesn't seem like school. But if I gave you this, you'd go, okay, I know where I am, right? Tests. Rules. Somebody said rules. This is totally typical. This is a photo. There's so much of this in school, right? First of all, that there's stickers, right? Of bugs. I have no idea what it has to do with, right? Never. I mean, look, come on. I was a 5th grade teacher for a while. Look, I do it, right? Underlines, different colors. Clear printing, and rules that are posted. I love this is so like school. Does this, like if you saw this, would you say school? Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is, everything. It's not just the fact that there's a rule, but like the big bubble letters that are clearly got from Lakeshore Learning Center, right? Probably around this, there's a border, scalloped edges, corrugated paper, right? And I love this, it sounds so good. Never hurt anyone on the inside or the outside. And you can see the beatific smile that the teacher gives the students. And what comes next? Be kind, be respectful, etc. But there's other rules like no chewing gum, right? Don't chew gum. Often along with the rules, I don't have a picture of it because it's so ubiquitous, I probably should just have it. There's also often a behavior chart with cards. Some people are like, oh, yeah, I got that red card that one day. Green, yellow, blue, red, whatever it is. Okay. Rules. One of my favorite slides. Taken in a school here in Santa Barbara. Division of people. This is really common also, a kind of big practice that is often there before the people get there. Maybe that's the way to talk about big practices. Practices that are kind of there before the people kind of even get there. We just kind of expect it. Big stuff. This is reading groups. Any guesses on what the high group is? Jedi, yeah. Droids and Wookiees. I just love it. Like, Chewbacca is the best guy in all of Star Wars, but he doesn't say anything. He's less articulate than Groot. Right? I mean, Groot at least says, "Oh, I'm Groot," right? Chewbacca just goes, "Ugh." The only person who can understand Chewbacca is another Wookiee or Han Solo. What? How did Han Solo know? Isn't it like he would go, "Ugh," and he'd go, "I know the accelerator's out." All right, but look. You think kids don't know what the high group is? Lucky, I don't know what happened to Aaron. I don't see these people moving. I don't see Carla show up. Lucky Carla. Boop. Hannah. Yeah, I don't know what happened to Hannah. I sent to the principal's office. All right. Hannah, you'll be in no group. You don't even speak Wookiee. But see? Small practices. All right. This is the stuff. That stuff that I just went through, that's mostly what most of us can write down pretty easily. Right? The small practices. This, I think, is where we get into the reading, which is Bud Meehan's paper on What Time Is It, Denise? So I'll go through these. Okay. It's not the clock. This is 100. This is KIQS is my acronym for Known Information Question Sequences. Note takers, write it down. You're not going to be tested on it, I don't think. Known Information Question Sequences. They're exchanges, first of all, sequences, right? They're conversations, right? They're conversations where the question that gets asked, the person who's doing the asking already knows the information, right? Known information question sequences. The example that Bud Meehan points out is this. I'll do it. What's your name in the Warriors jersey? Matt. Matt, what time is it?
It's probably close to 10:30.
Very good. Right? I know what time it is. I ask Matt. He tells me. And then I assess. The way that Bud Meehan talks about it is IRE or IRF sequences, right? Initiation, reply, evaluation. Right? I can do this. What's your name?
People.
April. I'm so glad you're here today. What's 2 + 2?
4.
Very good. How does this tell you you're in school? You probably didn't even notice. How does it tell you you're in school? Is that if you find these on the street, a fight could break out. Can you imagine if I'm walking on the street and I say, "Hey, Megan, what time is it?" And she says, just looks at her watch, she goes, "It's 10:30. And I say, "Very good." She'd be like, "Man, if you already knew, why'd you ask me?" "Man, forget you, sucker," or something, whatever. "Forget you. Why, you don't teach me." Or like, in the real world, we ask questions because we don't know the answer. When we're in school, we ask questions that we already know the answer to so that we can assess them. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying they tell us we're in school. So when you get a known information question sequence, you don't freak out and say, "Blah." You go, "I must be in school. This is You also find them in sports. Sports, you'll see a different version of it. Right? They're known information question sequences that are not designed to get an answer. Right? I'll give you an example of that. You find those too. I got to think of a name for them. There's something like shame sequences, which is like, "Sammy, are you supposed to throw the ball there?" "No, shut up! Don't throw the ball there." You get that kind of thing, right? where I know the answer and I'm asking you to, because I want you to know how mad I am and that you're stupid for doing it wrong. Sometimes they're designed to get answers, sometimes they're not. They're super complicated, but they're all over the place, right? We find them sometimes in school too. These simple versions are super common. Okay? I'm going to move through only because it's of time. It's okay. Yeah. Okay. Known information question sequence. This is a version of this called designedly incomplete utterances. I'm giving you the scientific name so you know. These are versions of known information question sequences that don't sound like questions, where I say, I'll do one for you. 2 plus 2 is class. 2 plus 2 is very good, right? Designedly incomplete utterances. My geometry teacher in high school, Mr. Osher, this is the only, it's like he couldn't get out 4 sentences without having one of these in. The opposite of an acute angle is, the opposite of an acute angle is, very good. And then he'd go on. Mr. Osher, his granddaughter was one of my students once and I didn't know it. And I was like, man, Mr. Osher used to do that. And she went, it's my grandfather. I was like, I'm not saying he's a bad guy. Designedly incomplete utterances are a version of known information question sequences. Again, how is it just that they're peculiar to school? Imagine somebody, do these at the dinner table. There's a great experiment that a sociologist named Harold Garfinkel did. He asked his students at UCLA 50 years ago to go home and act super polite. To say things like, would you please pass the green beans? Thank you, ma'am. Like, be exceedingly polite. And families got freaked out. What's the matter with you? Try that. Go home. Go into your room. Go talk to your roommates. Go into your apartment and say to your roommate, what I put on top of my spaghetti is... Just say it. Just see what happens. Totally, it's weird, right? But in school it's not weird. Or if I say, I've got my noodles. What goes next? And then somebody says, now put some sauce on it. Very good. They're weird. Funny, except that it's only funny because now they seem unusual. They happen in school all the time. One time I have a video of a teacher says, yesterday you read the book, I read the book to you. Today you're going to read the book to me. And the kid puts his hand up. And he goes, teacher doesn't call him. And finally she asks another question, like, what's on this page? And he raises his hand and she says, Kevin? And he says, if you read it to us already, then why do we have to read it back to you? Like, you already know the book. Same kind of thing, right? He was showing the silliness of, if you already know the answer to the question, why are you asking me? And the teacher just said something like, because that's how we do it. Next page. Good job. All over the place. Now this one is not just in school, it's everywhere. We definitely see it in school. You've seen this slide before, right? So that a kid, this is one that's going to be hard because it doesn't feel distinct to school. It's sometimes you get the good job when it's in a known information question sequence. But a lot of the times, the good job starts appearing in school at times where there was never a request or question. So a child will come up to a teacher and say, here, I did this. And the teacher will go, good job. Right? So even when it's not, it's a student-initiated performance, the teacher will say, good job. Now, again, we find this everywhere, but we certainly find it in school. Is this characteristic of school? I just want you to imagine that if a teacher got a version of good job, if a teacher got something like this, hey, look, teacher, what I did. And I said, it kind of sucks, actually. Your last one was better. It doesn't feel as familiar to school. Some of you may have had teachers like that and valued them, but the good job is ubiquitous. Okay, what else? The shield. I love this one. Some of you did it when I said to write down your list of things that tell you at school. You go like this. The shield maneuver. Kindergarten starts, we have hours and hours of videotape where kids, when they start kindergarten, most kids don't do it. In September, they don't. They go, what do you got? This is what I got. Let me have that pen. I like your purple. I'm going to do mine purple too. By January, they're going like this. I did mine purple. What? Stealing my purple color? Like only one person can have it. Or I start writing down things and I don't want anybody to see it. And the accelerated version of this, you've seen it, you might have done it, is when kids start building whole houses of shields. Right? With manila folders and binders. And they look around like they're ready for a thief to come in. Need some privacy. I had one kid, I was working with him, he was doing a practice SAT. It's designed to figure out what you got wrong. Right? So you can do better. Practice. No consequences. Everybody in class was like this. And he peeked over the shield, and the person was like, and I looked at him, why are you cheating? And he's like, I don't know. So that's another practice we find in schools, is looking at another person's work and putting it with the shield, looking at what another person's doing, right? And knowing that it's the wrong thing to do. You're not supposed to look at what anybody else is doing. That's called cheating. Okay. All right. Pick me. And my favorite one will end with this one. Turn sharking. Don't put your stuff away yet. Because turn sharking is a fun one. Turn sharking is the thing that happens right after pick me. Okay? Where I say, what's 2 plus 2? And raise your hands, please. What's 2 plus 2? And a bunch of kids raise their hand, and then I call on somebody, and the kid goes, And at that minute, what happens? Everybody else is like, oh! Like weakness, blood in the water. Which is why it's called turn sharking. Right? It's called turn sharking because somebody gets their turn, and even if whether they pause, it doesn't mean you've done it, but you've seen it. Whether they pause or they just get the wrong answer, right? Before we go, I just want to make sure you know how to do school. Raise your hand like you want to get called on. I really want to get called on. Some waving. People are pushing each other down. Nice. Some of the people, most of you are like, I hope that's goodbye. But my favorite one is this, actually. And we didn't do it this year, but it happens almost every year. This one. And then this. See you all on Tuesday.